Good morning, everybody. My name is Ron, W7DOA, Whiskey 7 Delta Oscar Alpha with 406 Ham Radio. I'd like to thank everybody who has subscribed to the channel. You're deeply appreciated. I would like to encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you like what you see, hit that bell icon so that you can be notified of future videos when they come out. Also hit the like button if you like what you see today down below. That helps with the search algorithms and gets me a little higher in the search rankings. All right, so today I want to talk a little bit about scan lists, receive group lists, and digital monitor. Basically, this all stems from ham radio operators wanting to listen to more stuff. Before we jump into that, let's take and recap just a little bit about how DMR radio actually works. I know we've covered this before, but let's go ahead and cover it again really quick because it is so terribly important to what we're talking about today. When you program a channel, you're programming a frequency that matches your local repeater or your local hotspot, whether that's a simplex frequency for a hotspot or an offset frequency for a repeater or a duplex hotspot. We're programming the frequency, no different than we would if we were in analog radio. In analog radio, we would program a CTCSS tone or a PL tone, however you want to describe that. And what that tone does is it activates the repeater. In digital radio or in DMR radio, we don't have a CTCSS tone. We have a color code, and that color code does the exact same thing that a CTCSS tone, and that basically activates the repeater and allows us to get into the repeater. Next, we program in a time slot, whether we want to talk on time slot 1 or time slot 2, and then your radio will transmit on that time slot. And then additionally, we're also programming in the talk group that we want to talk on. So your radio then transmits with a color code on a specific time slot to a specific talk group. And when your radio is receiving, it's receiving all of that stuff. And the easiest way to think about a radio receiving is it is receiving on a frequency. It has to be, or we wouldn't hear it, right? The next thing that your radio does is your radio checks to see whether it is the correct color code or not. After that, your radio checks to see whether what it's hearing is on the time slot that's programmed into that channel. If the time slots match, it passes that check, and then it goes to the talk group check, and it listens to see whether or not what's being transmitted is being transmitted for the talk group that your radio is set to receive. And this works really great if all you want to do is listen to one talk group. But how many of us out there only want to listen to one talk group? We're ham radio operators, we want to hear it all, right? So how do we listen to multiple talk groups at the same time, or listen for multiple talk groups at the same time? That's what I want to cover today. So stick around and we will get to that in just a minute. All right, so what I've done, I'm here in the Anytone 878 software version 1.23, and that's where we're going to be working today. I've already put in a few channels. We'll cover them in just a minute. I put in some talk groups, and we have created some scan lists and some receive group lists, and we will cover those each one in depth, so we're not really behind the curve, or you won't be behind the curve by the time we get done with this. And then at the end, we're going to throw in a little surprise. It is not my surprise. There are lots of folks that have done videos on this on YouTube, so this is certainly nothing that I've done, but it's a little surprise, so stick around. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick little shout out to Robert in Texas, Whiskey Echo 5 Romeo Alpha Delta, contacted me just this morning on Montana Statewide 3130 via DMR. He was looking for his Worked All States award, and so using DMR, we coordinated what frequency we could use on 20 meters to make that happen for him. Bands were a little bit rough this morning, but we did manage to get a contact through. So shout out to Robert down in Texas. Thanks for being there, and glad I could help you get your Worked All States from Montana. All right. So, and going over to the software here, we'll take a look, and these channels are not programmed correctly. I will tell you that up front, so don't use these numbers and think that they're going to work. This is for demonstration purposes only. So we have a couple different talk groups. We actually have 5 digital channels. We have 1 analog channel. And as you can see, they're not programmed correctly. We're just doing this for demonstration purposes. So here we have MPRG1, which is a talk group that's used quite frequently in the state of Montana. These frequencies are wrong, but we have this talk group of MPRG1 in time slot 2. So when my radio listens to this, in theory, it would be on this frequency. It would say, yep, I'm on the right time slot. I am using the correct color code, and I have the correct talk group. So it would decode that digital information and send it to me. But if I wanted to listen to all of these at the same time, there's a couple different ways we can do this. And the first way that we're going to talk about is setting up a scan list. So we'll go over here on the left-hand side. There is this button right here that says scan list, or this menu tree option. And we will look at the Helena one. And first of all, you'll see that we just have 2 channels in here, and then the 2-meter analog calling frequency. So we only have 3 channels that we're going to scan: MPRG1, MPRG2, and 2-meter calling frequency. I do want to point out that the 2-meter calling frequency is an analog channel. It is perfectly acceptable to put digital channels and analog channels together in the same scan list. In the Anytone radio, how do we get to that scan list? How do we use it? So if we go back over to our channels, we're going to open up MPRG1, and those scan lists are already built. And here in this list, there's a drop-down menu, and we can choose whether we want to use the Helena scan list or the Bozeman scan list. What that means is that it does not put this channel into that scan list. What this means is when my radio is sitting on the MPRG1 channel and I push the scan button to initiate the scan, this is the scan list that it's going to use, as we defined it over here. So if I'm on the MPRG1 channel and I press the scan button, it will use the Helena scan list. And we'll scan these 3 channels. Okay. So if I go over to the Bozeman Gallatin Valley channel, again, these frequencies are wrong, but in here we have the scan list of Bozeman. So if I'm on the Bozeman Gallatin Valley channel and I press the scan button, then I will use this scan list that has Bozeman Gallatin Valley, Montana statewide, Montana chat, and the 2-meter calling frequency. Also notice that this 2-meter calling frequency is in both scan lists, so that's completely acceptable too. So it's important to know and understand that little drop-down menu in your channel designates which scan list will be used if you initiate the scan from that channel. That's terribly important to understand. Here's the downside to the scan list. The Anytone radios, like this one here, the 878, the 868, I'm sure is not any better, are horribly slow at scanning. Horribly slow. If you're used to a commercial radio like a Motorola or a Kenwood or something like that, scan lists are very fast. They will go through 30 channels in a heartbeat on a scan list. These, it might take you a second to go through 3 or 4 channels. I don't know exactly what the scan list speed is. Compared to other radios, this is horribly slow. So if you, like on these scan lists that we just looked at, they're only 2 or 3 channels long, probably would work out just fine. If you started to have a scan list with 20 or 30 channels in it, it would take so long to go through that scan list and come back around. You could potentially miss a conversation or only come in on the very end of it. So while that is an option that we can use, it's probably not our best option. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is receive group lists. I see a lot of bad information on Facebook about received group lists. One guy says you absolutely don't ever use them. The next guy says you have to have a received group list for every channel that you create. And it's just, let's clear that up just a little bit. Um, Number one, how you program your channel with your frequency, your time slot, your color code, and your talk group. That channel will listen for that talk group. You do not need to have a receive group list in there. So what is a receive group list for? Again, you'll notice that my receive group lists are named Helena and Bozeman. So kind of like scan lists, we just reuse the name, but let's not get confused. In the Helena group, we have just MPRG1 and MPRG2. And you will notice that over here on this side, we don't even have an option for the analog channel to go in there because it can't go into a receive group list. It's only listening to talk groups. So here's how this works. Your radio starts to receive a transmission. It's obviously on the right frequency or you wouldn't hear it at all. Your radio checks to see, is it the right color code? Check, we're good. Is it the right time slot? Check, we're good. Is it the correct talk group? Check, we're good. But in addition to this talk group here, here's a whole list of talk groups that we've just talked about here in our receive group list. In addition to this one, we also want to listen to these. So what's the benefit of that? Well, the benefit of that might be you have 4 or 5 talk groups that you want to listen to, and you could have one channel in a scan, or one channel, and you could listen to all of those. The downside to that is it will come up on your screen and it will tell you what talk group it is, but it may not be the talk group that that channel is programmed to. And so if you're not paying attention, let's say you're on MPRG1 and in your receive group you have Bozeman-Gallen Valley, and somebody starts talking on Bozeman-Gallen Valley and you hear that and you want to talk back to them, well, you weren't paying attention. You just assumed that it was on MPRG1 and you key back up on MPRG1, that's the talk group it's going to go to. It's not going to go to Bozeman-Gallen Valley. And so that conversation will never happen. So you have to pay a little bit of attention to your radio screen when traffic starts coming in. One way that I personally try to alleviate that a little bit is when I am calling, I will put out my call sign and I will go W7DOA on Bozeman-Gallen Valley talk group, or W7DOA on MPRG1. And then that way, if somebody hears me but's not looking at their radio screen, they now have an audio cue of where they need to go to talk back to me. That helps out a little bit. So we can do a scan list or we can do receive group lists. The other caveat or the downside to a receive group list is if you have a channel with a receive group list and you put it in a scan list and you're scanning, the scan feature ignores that receive group list. So it's not a shortcut to create one channel with a receive group list and think that your scan is going to pick it up, because your scan will ignore that receive group list while it's scanning. So that's kind of a caveat there. The third way that we can do this is with digital monitor, and we're not going to go into the software on this because this all happens on the radio. In the software, you would set up a key, one of your keys, to switch between digital monitor off, single slot, or double slot. Some other radio brands may call it promiscuous mode. Anytone calls it digital monitor, and they have the option of single slot or double slot. Some radio brands may not have that. It's just promiscuous mode. So when we go into digital monitor, now basically what our radio is doing is taking one step of that check out. It's still on the right frequency, it still has the correct color code, and it's still the correct time slot, but we're going to ignore the check for the correct talk group, and we're going to pass anything that matches the other checks. So anything that is being transmitted on that time slot will get sent to your speaker and you'll hear it. That's in single slot digital monitor. On the Anytone radio, we also have an option for a double slot digital monitor, wherein your radio now skips the time slot check as well as the talk group check. So if it's the right frequency and the right color code, you will hear it. This also works in scan. So if you have a double slot digital monitor open with one digital channel in your scan list, it will listen for anything that comes across that channel. And in digital monitor, that will work in scan. Here's the downside to that. You will hear anything that's DMR that comes across that frequency with the right color code. And you may hear a talk group come across that you don't have programmed into your radio. So here comes the surprise. Again, I want to say this is not my idea. Somebody else came up with this. I just saw it the other day and I thought I would pass it along to you. I wish I could remember the guy's name, the video that I watched about this. I would love to give him credit. I just want to let you know that it was not mine. On your Anytone radio, we do have it turned on. On your Anytone radio, whether this is a 578 or the 878, I believe the 868s will do it also. If you press and hold the 0 key at the bottom, I don't know if you can see that, kind of, not really. It goes into a private ID and you can type in a number. If you press the pound key or the hash key down here in the corner, that changes it to talk group ID, and then you can key in a talk group and then you can just key up your radio. Now, wherever you are when you start this, so let's say right now this channel is on time slot 2. When I do that, it will transmit on time slot 2. So if I wanted to use time slot 1, I would simply move it to a channel that is time slot 1, then press and hold the 0 key and press the hash key to get to talk group ID. However, the way my radio is set up currently, it's only good for 1 second. So I will transmit on that frequency, and as soon as I let off the key, that talk group goes away. So if we go back into our software, this is a neat little thing that I saw the other day. We're going to go into optional settings. There we go. Up here in this corner on the right hand side, there's a digital function tab. So we'll click the digital function tab. The third and fourth line down from the top is manual dial group, talk group hold time, and manual dial private talk group hold time. If we will switch these to, if you scroll all the way down there, there's a number of seconds or even minutes that it will hold, or we can press infinite on both of those and then reprogram our radio, re-upload that to our radio. And now when we go into pressing and holding the 0 key, and we go to there and we press the talk group ID and we dial in a talk group that we want to talk on, now that will stay there infinitely. Now, here's your homework. I have not played with this. I will be totally honest with you. I just saw that the other day. I have not played with it. So your homework is when your software says infinite, I would imagine that it would stay there as long as you stay on that channel. Does that manually dialed in talk group go away when you change a channel, or do you have to completely power your radio off and back on? I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't played with that. That's your homework. Try it. Leave comments in the section below and let me know how it works for you. See if that works out. So just to recap the different ways that we can listen to multiple channels, we can put in a scan list, which is painfully slow. We can put in a receive group list that works really well, but we have to pay attention to our radio, and it does not work if that channel is put into a scan list and is scanning. Or we can use digital monitor, which will work while it's scanning, but then we have to really pay attention to our radio. And then if in the digital monitor section, if we encounter a talk group that we don't have programmed into our radio, we can press and hold the 0 key and type in that talk group. If we have programmed our radio to infinite, then we can use that talk group for as long as we want. That's about all I have for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining with us. And like I said, hit that subscribe button down below if you'd like to. Hit the like button and hit the bell icon so that you get updated on new videos. Until the next video, 7-3. Thanks for joining. W7 DOA.